Welcome to Tourist Railroad Connections, More Important Than Ever, Episode 6. As the pandemic continues to paralyze the world and most important to everyone here, the tourist railroad industry, more than ever, we need meaningful connections. None of us have the right answers as how to navigate these uncharted waters. No one has ever dreamed of the scenarios we now face. We are all working in the dark, using our gut instincts to make decisions and trying to keep our organizations afloat. Good morning from Chicago. My name is Michael Kuehl, and I'm the president of Dynamic Ticket Solutions. I'm joined by my co-host, Josh Miller, station manager from the North Shore Scenic Railroad. Today, Josh and I, along with our panelists, will be furthering the discussion that we started 5+ weeks ago. We don't have all the answers, and we're not claiming to be experts. We are facilitating a dialogue to share ideas and to help establish or reestablish connections. We would like to encourage you to participate in our discussion. On your screen, you should have a dialog box entitled Go to Webinar Control Panel. And within that box, there was 2 sections. If you look at the bottom section, you should notice a gray bar labeled questions, and below that, another white box with the words type questions here. Simply type your questions and hit the enter or send, and we will do our best to work your questions and comments into our conversations. We have also made available recordings from our past webinars. To access them, simply go to www.dynamicticketsolutions.com and click on the webinars link at the top navigation. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Josh.
Thank you so much, Mike. Welcome everybody to our show today. This is episode 6 of a series that we have done with Dynamic Ticket Solutions. My name is Josh Miller, and I'm the station manager at the North Shore Scenic Railroad in Duluth, Minnesota. So hello from Duluth, Minnesota. And I've been working with Mike here on this series of webinar presentations where we can get railroads together and talk about the current situation that we're in and what to do next. So we're not all inventing the wheel from the beginning, and we can network together. I'm really excited about today's show coming up. We have some awesome panelists here joining us. Quick want to talk though about last week. Mike has put up all of our previous webinars episodes onto one nice web page where you can get those, and he mentioned that, and it's definitely worth going back and watching some of those. A few of the great takeaways from last week's show: we had Cheryl Marcel from the president and CEO of the California State Railroad Museum, and also with Heritage Rail Alliance. She has a Train Newswire interview, I think, on Newswire today on Trains Magazine. And we also had Staffy Pappas from Assistant General Manager of the Cumbers and Tultech. And some really great takeaways from that conversation that we had. You know, Staffy started it with this really great quote from Winston Churchill of "never waste a good crisis," meaning that it's a good opportunity to do a lot of learning and adjustments and changes. You know, he talked about nimble being kind of a buzzword, but it's something that we all, as managers of railroad operations in some way, have to be able to constantly make that target move. I think in our business, we tend to be very much, this is how we've done it, so this is how we're going to do it. And that's generally how railroads tend to work. But certainly going forward here, we certainly have to be able to be flexible. He also talked about liberalizing your refund policy. We talked about having a point person being in charge of cleaning and getting those daily tasks done. And that can even be somebody that you empower who's maybe, you know, a frontline car attendant who you're just going to empower to be sort of a manager in between, in charge of some of the new policies and procedures. And of course, regular cleaning of your trains all day long and so on. So we talked about some really great topics. Definitely go back and check those out if you missed it. It was a really great episode and stuff. We're going to go forward here with that conversation. Today we have Roger Fuehring from the president. He's the president of the Railroad Passenger Car Alliance, the RPCA. We all know of that. And Roger Fuehring, I'm glad to have you here. We also have Kirsten Ayers from the president. She is the president of the Leadville, Colorado and Southern Railroad in Leadville, Colorado. Breaking news, they started operating. Their train is open and selling tickets, and they operated last weekend. We're going to come back to them in just a second, and we'll get this conversation started. I do want to quickly talk a little bit about our agenda for today. we're going to talk a little bit about Kirsten's business plan as she has it in action, and adjusting for different things related to COVID and her business operation of a tourist railroad. Then we'll talk to Roger Fuehring here on what the RPCA has done and is doing in gathering information provided to members of that organization. We'll talk a little bit about marketing and so on from there. Our webinar today is about an hour long. We will be done about 11:30 or so. We do want you to participate. Everybody who's on here, there is a question box there, defaults to the right of your screen. Leave questions, comments there, and we will work them into the conversation as best as we can to keep things moving along, and we want you to participate. One quick thing I wanted to show off that our museum has put in here. This is a real background behind me. This is the Lake Superior Railroad Museum in Duluth, Minnesota. And you'll see right there that box here in front of the trains. That's a TV screen where we have video exhibits playing in the museum. And the way those started was a button. You come and push that button, and in an average day in the summertime, that button might get pushed 100 times or more. And it would be next to impossible in the future going forward here of cleaning it after every use. We actually do have this on a list of check boxes for the cleaners to clean, but we have replaced them with a new technology, well, not new, but new to us, where this is a motion sensing button, which just replaces this, goes in the box. There is technology behind it. This is just a faceplate. You wave your hand and it plays the video. So kind of a cool thing that we are working on installing here at the Lake Superior Railroad Museum in Duluth. All right, let's get into our business here. We're going to talk to our panelists. We're going to come to a guest question in just a second there, Mike. But first, I'm going to give a chance for our panelists to talk. Tell us a little bit about your operation and so on. We'll start with Roger, RPCA, and how you got involved with that group, kind of what your status is here as it relates to, May 28th.
Well, RPCA was started in early 1980s, I believe 1982. My involvement included being drugged along by my dad at 14 years old. It was kind of a requirement. We started with a group mostly involving a lot of the groups that revolved around the 765 program. At that time, it had taken off in 1979 for the first time, and we started running excursions shortly after that in Ohio and other places. But the car owners themselves were looking for ways to group together for brake shoes, insurance, how to keep car sets together for the purpose of running trips instead of breaking a train set up and having the expense of bringing them all back together at different locations. How could we rotate that equipment around as needed in order to share that expense with other organizations that were running excursions? So when we started back then, it was just out of need and for the purpose of survival. We had all purchased cars through Amtrak sales and other sales very reasonably, but we didn't have the resources to maintain those cars. So we had to learn as we go, and it's involved into education. Now we are the leader with helping the FRA as well as the AAR in establishing the regulations and the rules that transpire for our cars. And those cars are now utilized not so much in excursions as you see them on tourist lines, on the back of Amtrak and in other locations.
Awesome. Well, Roger, I thank you for being here. We'll come back to you in just a second, talk a little bit more about the current situations we're in. But I want to talk to Kirsten Ayers a little bit about yourself, your operation, what you're doing, and the breaking news that you are up and running.
Hey, so this operation started back in 1988 by my parents. My brother and I have since taken over. I've been a part of this business since I could walk. 12 years ago, I became the marketing director. I've been doing that ever since. And 3 years ago, became the president. I have known everything, done virtually every job, and I'm just really very glad to be here, be able to be open, and I'm very thankful for my staff and what I've got going on.
Awesome. Well, I thank you for being here, both of you, and we'll get things started here in our conversation. Have about a little over 60 people here on our webinar. Glad to have everybody watching along. Feel free to participate in that question box. We'll turn it over to Mike. We have a question from one of our registrations.
Yeah, we do actually, and I'm going to combine two different questions. Victor Ferretti from the Whippany Railroad Museum is asking, has a protocol been established by the CDC as it pertains to tourist railways? And also from John Howell from the Santa Fe Southern Railway asks, for those who are opening or planning to do so, with which government officials are you communicating your plans?
That's a very good question. I think I'm going to toss this one to Kirsten first, in terms of government officials and how that relates to your operation.
So there's nothing explicit out there to my knowledge right now on the CDC on tourist operations. However, when it comes to working with professionals and different pay grades than mine, for sure, I have got to look at federal regulations, state regulations across different branches, from railroads to the Public Utilities Commission. And then as we go smaller and smaller, from my county commissioners, my local health department, and my city council, I am discussing everything up, round, sideways, and backwards. And it's just been a lot to take care of. One of the ways that I've done that is by creating my own kind of business operation plan, because if I get too much feedback, then I don't know what I'm going towards or what I'm trying to fix. So I've got something established that has helped me let people give me input without, which is at least productive. There's a lot of times when there's a lot of input out there, especially right now where the CDC just changed from no touch surfaces to touch surfaces, that I just need something that somebody can directly give me feedback on. So that's been really helpful.
Excellent. Yeah, that's an important component, is actually taking all those different thoughts and suggestions that we hear from people and putting them in one place to organize your operation. Come back to you in a second here. We'll give Roger a chance to talk about that question a little bit, and how that relates to government agencies and our businesses as operators of railroads and museums.
Kristen is correct. It's confusing out there when CDC has conflicting statements within a week and a half of each other on contact surfaces. Obviously, everything in a rail car is contact surfaces. So we require use of handrails as we climb up in the cars. And if you have a dome car or a bi-level car, you even have more contact surfaces, not to mention walking through the hallways. So I think what they've done at their railroad, as well as what the rest of us are doing, is obviously taking all the ideals from obviously webinars like this, what other people have put out, and we are having to legislate ourselves, so to speak, to kind of pull it together and self-regulate ourselves and show what the models are. You know, there's no model for anything like this, because we're not a store, we're not a movie theater, we're not a restaurant, we're a combination of everything. You know, when you look at our gift shops and you look at lining up to even load the train, how many times have we all loaded excursion trains and we're packed? And then how do you cycle those people through those cars at a safe distance? Not to mention the contact that's happening on the handrails, the hallways, the doors, which last week we were told we didn't have to worry about. This week we do. And that's not anything political. It just shows how much confusion there is out there, coming from the federal level, state level, and the local level. And the best thing you can do is do your best to work with your local health departments on your policies. And they, in the end, may completely say, we don't want you to operate. And at some point, you have to make that decision based on what you feel comfortable with.
Or certainly have something for you to alter or make an adjustment that they may or may not agree with. Mike from our audience. We have Scott McGee mentioned that they shared their county health officer, with their county health officer and working with them. Kirsten, let's talk about that. You put together a business plan, and you mentioned a little bit about sharing it with some of your local officials. How far to go with? There's a fine line between sharing and having things checked out by local health officials and asking permission, which is a whole nother thing.
Yeah, so I've had to be really fluid throughout this. As we all know, we're answering to so many more people than we've necessarily had to answer to before. And then there's a conception, or rather there's a reality out there where the strictest rule is what reigns. So Well, I started on May 7th with this protocol, which was required at a local level, which I submitted, and I received no response at all from my local health department. 7 days later, I sent it to every elected official, including the coroner, that was available, because I needed a response. I needed to know if my advertising was going to start. I needed to know what I could do and what I could not do. And what I have subsequently learned is there's a lot of people out there with credentials who don't want to comment because they personally have no idea what the answer is either. And obviously at the federal level, we're getting mixed emotions. So I've kind of had to turn the table and bully my way forward in some respects to be able to say, here's what I am doing. Now, can somebody please tell me what I'm doing wrong? And since I've received little to no feedback, and I've written on almost a weekly basis to my local officials, informing them that I'm proceeding in this matter, I have received no feedback from the health department. I'm proceeding in this manner, I have received no feedback from the health department. So if any of you have somebody who's actually worthwhile to comment on, please befriend them. I have had some local nurses review my plan and get back to me, but what I'm realizing is, any one person who's been put in position to comment on it, from the insurance agencies to local health departments who are now all of a sudden becoming in charge, they don't know what they're in charge of either. I subsequently learned that the 5 people in my health department had never ridden my train either. So there is a lot of issues, lack of communication or blatant non-existence information out there. And we're having to, in many ways, create our own blueprint. What I've done with my blueprint, my COVID business plan that I've utilized, is I have issued it to all of the basically unique places. So we've got a zip line in town, we've got a yurt hut in town, we've got a bunch of people who do hiking up to the yurts and so forth. And I said, hey guys, this is for a train, but this is how we can get them to acknowledge that we need to move forward. We unfortunately have to accept the risk because that is the business that we're in. We need to open because our employees need jobs. And in order to move forward with this, can you tweak my business plan to try and make it into, maybe not your business plan, but to get enough ideas to create a plan so that somebody has something to sign off on? I can't ask the 5 people at my local health department who literally have never ridden my train and do not know how long a train car is, right, to create my plan. I have to create my plan, give them a blueprint for them to comment and critique on.
Well, let's quick talk a little bit about that, because the reality is railroad operations are very unique in that, and we've talked about this in some of our previous episodes, is that, are we restaurants, or are we rides, or are we transportation, or are we, and the answer is everything, all of the above. There won't be a specific guideline to your tourist railroad operation should do this A, B, C, D going forward because of COVID. How have you worked, identifying yourself with those authorities who probably don't know much about railroading?
That's correct. So one of the terms you guys used earlier was nimble. I've been using fluid, and that is, I have identified myself in the most fluid manner possible. I have stacks of federal regulations, stacks of state regulations. I've got Public Utilities Commission's regulations, and then I've got local guidelines. And I have things internally contradicting itself in some respects for my own best use. So take, for instance, the fact that my local said that no recreational activity can start till June 1st. Well, at the state level, railroads are included. So in this case, I'm going to call myself a railroad. I've got other Colorado railroads who are calling themselves restaurants because restaurants are allowed to be open. And we are not one single thing. We are regulated by more people than almost anybody I know. And I am going to use that to my full advantage. And those people who do not know what is going on, which is in some cases our local health department, in some cases our county commissioners, and in some cases the fact that we're all stuck first and foremost listening to the FRA regulations and the state regulations. I'm trying to either educate them or explain my own loophole to people. I think that we all have to know enough to know where we stand, remain a fluid business, whether we need to be a restaurant today, whether we need to be the person who hires, 5% of the town, or whether we need to just keep going, whether they know what we're doing or not. And I think that a lot of this is not friendly. I'm a person who 3 months ago would not have gotten in the middle of a controversy. And I was asked yesterday if I've gotten a lot of negative feedback, and I have, and I've had to welcome that, because they're telling me that I'm a railroad, but then they're telling me that I'm a tourist industry. And then they're telling me I'm not a restaurant, but they're holding me to the same standards as a restaurant. And you're going to have to, no more than anybody else, know all of those areas to which we apply, which is a significant amount, and be able to use their own rules to benefit ourselves.
Sure. Well, let's come back to talking a little bit about your opening weekend here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to turn the question over there to Roger, though, from the RPCA. Now, I think it might be a misconception that RPCA is specifically to private rail car owners and rich guys on the back of Amtrak trains. And although it is that, there's a lot more to it. And you represent all of the tourist railroad operations, anybody who has private rail cars, basically, as well. What kinds of things have you put together as far as understanding the new regulations and operations going forward, especially when it comes to do with multiple locations in different states, and sometimes some of us cross borders between counties and cities and states?
Well, that was the problem with, an example would be on the back of the Amtrak right now. Amtrak regulations have all got to be based on the strictest area in which you run in. So therefore, if you start out in one area that's less restrictive and you end up in one that's more restrictive, you might be violating a rule. So that's why you're just not seeing many private cars on the rear of Amtrak at the moment, if any at all. As far as RPCA goes, we've always been kind of known as the wrench turners. When you speak of wealthy car owners, a lot of us are, just have it for a hobby and have it be on a tourist line or what have you, not necessarily in the back of Amtrak. We actually have probably more car owners that are in that field than we do as private car owners on the back of Amtrak. Sure. We do own the Railway Passenger Car Numbering Bureau, which carries the RPCX recording mark, which we regulate very heavily. But as far as the virus goes and how to proceed, we have reached out to our members and asked them to respond back to us in regards to some of the things that they are doing, things that they are seeing in their areas. And we communicate that through our electronic information exchange, which is our monthly newsletter. So we have one coming out the first of the month. We've fielded a few questions, including the insurance questions, which I think you want to get into at some point. And those are the behind the scenes things that we're trying to regulate through right now. The things that are unseen by most of us that we know long-term is going to affect us. Similar to after 9/11, suddenly we all had to add terrorism insurance. We never would have thought that in the past. We had to have a separate rider or a separate policy. So we see that coming down the road. So those are the type of things that we're hopefully trying to get in front of, but it's going to be difficult. And as Kristen said, it turns you into a little bit more of a tougher skin because you've got to learn all aspects of everything and every regulatory industry that's out there that's trying to come towards you. And at the same time, build local confidence and sell hope to people that have, let's face it, have been a little bit hopeless as they've been locked up in their houses. And we hope to see us as a bridge to be one of those industries that can come out and provide people with fun that is not a beach crowded with tons of people. And, I don't know about you all, but some of the scenes you see over Memorial Day with the swimming pools and everybody crammed in there. We don't want that on our trains. We want to have an alternative, especially for the kids. We want them to get out there and enjoy. We want to encourage that next generation that loves trains. And we want to be living history. Railroads have been through this before in 1918. And so we can learn from the past. And obviously we have learned on the medical side a lot more since 1918. So we know how to do it safely. Obviously there's been some great examples. Obviously when I went to my first restaurant, which was just 2 weeks ago with my wife, we had to wait outside and the attendant was going to come and get us. And there by the table was a hand washing station that you had to wash your hands before you went into the restaurant.
Interesting.
And that's a great idea that you could see applying to our rail industry, because obviously everybody's gonna be touching those handrails as they go up.
For sure.
So you automatically know everybody has their hands clean before they touch the handrails. That's a start. So just relying on other people to bring us their information, try to get that out and distinguish between all these government agencies on what is real and what is not. And like I said, the CDC is a good example. So
in learning those regulations and policies and information, as an organization, what has our PCA done? Sounds like you're gathering a lot of information. How do you share that then with your members or even the public, non-members?
well, right now we're sharing it through that monthly newsletter and trying to get the information out. We have the ability to do email blasts just like anybody else through Constant Contact and what have you to get that information out there. There's obviously a lot of liability involved when you put things in stone. So like you've seen in the previous policies that's been out there, it's almost like carpet bombing. And by carpet bombing, you're covering absolutely everything from the East Coast to the West Coast. That's a little difficult to do at times. So the biggest thing that we can recommend for people is obviously work with their local people that they're running, like Kristen has done. And if they don't give you the answers, because so many people don't want to sign off on this stuff. If you put out a plan, no government agency wants to sign off on it because no one wants to be, they don't want to be putting their name out there for that. For whatever reason, a lot of it's liability, a lot of it's politics.
Sure.
So unfortunately, that leaves us in a position to take the safest course possible. Could be including UV lights within the air conditioning systems. We could be perceived real easily with the closed window cars as having equipment that is similar to a cruise ship where it's an incubator. So we've got to figure out how to move beyond that. And I know there was a question last week, and we've put some suggestions in our current information exchange that goes out the first of the month. So primarily through our information exchange, and then obviously we're always open to questions if they contact us through the website, if our membership has issues. And a lot of them have our contact information, so they can get that information, questions to us, and we can do our best to research it out.
Sure. Well, thank you there, Roger. We have about a half hour left in our show here. We have about 70 people on. I thank you all for watching. Today, we're talking with Roger Fuehring from the RPCA and Kirsten Ayers of the Leadville, Colorado and Southern in Leadville, Colorado, who had opened. We're going to talk about her opening weekend here in just a second. We do have a question, though, from our audience in that question box. Mike, would you like to share that with us?
Yeah. This is specifically targeted, Roger. Is there any update on HVAC filters for AC and enclosed cars? That question comes from Randy Gustafson of Stone Consulting.
No, I think you probably want to discuss with your local HVAC contractors on what's available out there for filters for your particular car. I also believe that there's definitely something good with the black or the UV light that's out there. UV light has been around for a long time, especially when it comes to mold and what have you within air conditioning systems. The problem, as we all know, in a passenger car is your return air is at one end of the car, so everything has to cycle back through the car. If we're sitting next to each other, there's more of a danger of you getting droplets based on how loud I'm talking to you, especially if I don't have a face mask. I think those type of scenarios and having separation within our coaches, especially having every other seating, I think you're going to do better in those type of situations, especially in closed cars. But at the same time, get the best filters you can get based on your HVAC contractors, put in the UV lights and advertise that you are doing that so that the general public knows that you are cleaning those air systems. One thing that happens a lot with air conditioning systems on tourist lines especially is the air ducts never get cleaned. Right. If you take a common Pullman standard 1950 coach and you drop the air ducts, you can drop them down, vacuum them out, and get them clean. So they're already a lot of times dirty. I've been in cars that have carpet on the ceiling that is black because they run behind a steam engine. Well, that's only come from one area. That's come through the fresh air intake.
Sure.
So we as an industry have to be better about cleaning our air ducts to begin with. So it doesn't hurt to go in there and start cleaning them down.
Sure. Yeah, that is a good point. Now, Kirsten, I want to turn it back over to you. Talk a little bit about your opening weekend here. Now, I know that you operate with a lot of open air cars, which are at a premium right now, I think, in the tourist railroad world. Tell us a little bit about Memorial Day weekend in Leadville, Colorado.
Right. So I was pleasantly surprised that we had a fairly good turnout on this weekend. It was really great. We had a lot of returning patrons who'd gone before. You know, all of the best laid plans are subject to high tweaking right now. So we have stickers, we have signs, we have plans, we have hand sanitizer. It's the first thing you see when you enter any of the cars. But we definitely learned that everything's on the fly. Everything needs to change. Some of the things that we hadn't thought about, we've had to rearrange. But obviously we did social distancing. It was pretty easy. We did not have a mask policy because patrons are not required to wear masks where we are, just employees. But like you said, because of the open air cars, the UV light coming down, that has made it substantially easier for us. We've kind of, you know, really made that what our selling point is, even in our advertising as we're opening, is we have open cars, the UV light is there, it's being utilized. We're at 10,000 feet, we're as close to the sun as you can get sometimes. So even though it snows on Monday, it still is a good place to be. What did we learn? We had a lot of employees, and like you said, designating a single employee to be, or per car, to really be the person who's sanitizing, watching things, cleaning things, made our world a lot easier. So even though we have lower patrons, we actually have higher employees, just because that's what we need to be able to maintain the social distancing and the sanitary that we need in this area. We've had some things that we've purchased that have been totally useless. Our masks, because I bought them because initially we were going to be required to hand them out to our patrons. A lot of our patrons are out there to begin with because they don't want to be masked up. They want to be outside. They want to, you know, be free, for lack of a better term. So there's some things that I was expecting to use that I didn't use, and there's other things that I've gone and rushed out and purchased, which includes a lot of the signage. A lot of the signage for the open air cars. There's even signage out there that says, remember to social distance when you're outside. Just some basic things that keep my crew from having to be in an interaction with a patron, but that also, you know, reminds the patrons to respect other people and their analysis. One of the interesting things that I did, and I work with my father also, and I was trying to hide a sign from him, and the sign said something to the effect of, if you do not accept the risk, you've chosen to leave your house, and you don't want to accept the risk of having, you know, COVID-19 out and about, it's in this world right now, please leave and do not ride my train. Now, that is a super hard statement, and I was absolutely terrified of the other owners seeing it and what they would say to it. And it was quite interesting because by the time I fessed up on Monday morning, two of them were like, oh, great. So, you know we're all worried about the liability, but we're also not getting straight answers from our insurance companies. Sometimes the best policy is honesty, and honesty is out there. They've chosen to take the risk of leaving their home. And if you don't accept that risk, or you want to start a fight over someone else not having a mask, just don't ride my train. And I know that's just totally contradictory from everything I've learned over the last 12 years. I have been the marketing person, and I can't. It was so hard to stomach posting this. But, I think that right now, just a little taste of honesty is helping me out and helping my employees out to get through this as well.
Let me ask you quick though, what kinds of things that you had, it sounds like you had things really planned out. You had signage, you had policies, procedures, you had a business plan. What specific things did you not think of last weekend as you're running around with a clipboard as a manager, writing things down and making notes, that something that maybe we haven't thought of?
Main things, which is boarding. We didn't have staggered boarding. We boarded at 12:30, like end of statement. So I don't have a place for people, except for my parking lot, to loiter, but they're all loitering in this area. So boarding was extremely troublesome when you started looking at some crowds starting to gather. So we boarded early, just on the fly, in kind of staggered situations. The other thing that I had not really intended was we have a number of plexiglass partitions up, but there were certain areas that I hadn't really identified as needing those plexiglass partitions. So all of a sudden that night we're on the table saw cutting out more plastic partitions to post up over the bar that we hadn't really thought about. Obviously, we remember the registers areas, we remember this, we remember that, but there were a lot of other areas that were like, oh, we need to protect our employees here, we need to protect our patrons there. So we did do quite a few tweaks on Saturday evening and Sunday morning just to get up and ready for the next day. I would say Sunday went a lot better and a little bit more smoothly, which it's opening day. Opening day is always interesting. And I would just say don't get discouraged. One of the things that Governor Polis here in Colorado has said is, I'm not going to force anybody to spend tons and tons of money. I did go out and get some nicer signage and a bunch of things, but my crew kept telling me, Kirsten, pull back. Don't do this until we know you have to. Don't spend, X amount of dollars before we're sure that this is or isn't going to work in the first place. And it was really my crew that said, pull back and wait and see what happens. And that was probably the best thing that we did, because we found the things that we did need to tweak, and we found the things that we could let lie. Following the footprint worked. I honestly didn't think it would. I thought we would need more arrows and we would need more structure. Nope, that part worked. So don't spend too much money. Spend some money, sure, getting this in place, but pull back. Try and figure out, is it worthwhile? I would say having 6 sheets of Lexan available for me to cut that Saturday night was totally worthwhile. On the other hand, probably purchasing another 3 or 4 of those plastic partitions. Railroads move constantly. Those plastic partitions were not working very well for us because we move an awful lot. So we've got to add some structure and some oomph to some of these things. So there's definitely a lot of learning.
Sounds like you really did your homework on it. Mike, we have a question from the audience here.
Rachel Gray from the Blue Ridge Scenic Railway asked, did you add any disclaimers for patrons purchasing tickets?
No. So the first thing we did was we posted the sign that I effectively said, if you're acknowledging this risk, you're accepting it, and moving forward, please don't ride my train, or if you are, you're accepting this risk. That was what I had gotten with my insurance agency as an initial push, because I couldn't afford to reprint all of my tickets. Now I have since created a new ticket for my new launch card that just started on Saturday, and I'm super excited about it. And on the bottom of that ticket, since I had not gone into production yet, does have the stipulations that says, I indemnify as a Leadville, Colorado Southern Railroad, its officers and employees from, any infectious disease or this and that. But, my family is a bunch of lawyers. You're going to sue if you're going to sue. It just is what it is. Unfortunately, we've chosen to take these jobs and take that liability. So I just, like I said, the best policy is honesty and kind of putting it out there for everybody. Never in my life did I think I'd have at the end of a marketing campaign the statement, don't ride my train if you don't feel comfortable, but there it is. And that's all I can do for right now until I get my tickets printed with more small fine print.
Roger, what are your thoughts? Just your reaction to this conversation.
Well, I admire what she's had to go through, and I like the honesty of the signage. I think being honest with the public, they're not stupid. You don't treat them that way. And I think that's the best step forward, because then if they are offended and they walk away, then that's one less problem you have. I think, on a little bit of a separate note on cleaning the inside of these cars, especially the age of them, we have to be careful. I know in the freight side business, which is my professional job, we're having one railroad that was using bleach and water inside the cabs, wiping them down consistently. Guess what was happening? We were having air brake failures and computer failures. So the gaskets were getting ate away. Imagine that on your 1910 business car, on the woodwork. We're seeing some of the brass in one car we're using currently for a break room. They're spraying it down with a disinfectant, and that brass has turned green. Imagine that. So I think there's some other lessons out there to be learned too, how to preserve our equipment during COVID-19.
Sure.
because we're starting to see some issues there. And I'm interested in, Krista, in what you guys have experienced, because you have some pretty nice cars there.
Yeah, Kirsten, tell us a little bit about the actual cleaning procedures in place that might be a little different than what you have normally done.
They're super complicated and extensive. One of the things that our local situation put us through was we've got to do temperature check-in and check-outs and cleaning sheets. At any time, the health department can come in and be like, "Where's your cleaning sheet?" So high-touch areas certainly, but like
For staff, I'm sorry to interrupt there, but it was for staff and crew. Is that correct? Not the whole.
yes, sorry,
Yeah.
staff and crew. No, but we've got on check and on hand. So like you said, we've got plaster, we have wainscoting, we've got metal. None of this is working very well up. Like the best thing we've got going for us is being at 10,000 feet and having a lot of ultraviolet light and a lot of sun. So that's kind of our best situation and our best scenario. But some of the things that we've done is our vinyl coverings, which we cannot clean with bleach, obviously. We're trying to create a pseudo cover, a plastic cover that would be cleanable. It's frustrating my crew because it's very cumbersome. So we're trying to figure out if there's any sort of thing that would be, replaceable or disposable. But exactly, it's been so very painful just making it through, knowing that, okay, we can't use bleach on this, we can't use this on that, we can't touch any of our old stuff. Like you said, airlines, we've got technology left and right, and it's very painful. And we're daily trying to come up with new plans and getting frustrated at each other because something failed again, or something is now broken because we actually tried to do the right thing. So it's been frustrating. One thing that I did on my retail side was I removed at least, if not more than 50% of my retail. I would say, almost 70% of my retail from the floor, just because the efforts to clean, and again, this goes against anything I've been doing for 12 years. I love my retail shops. I love having my retail on the train. This is super important to me. And I took it all out because my employees and my business does not have the time necessarily to deal with all of this. We've moved several of like our t-shirt bins and some of our retail behind the counter, so that it's just a single person handling them. But yeah, it's just a whole new world. Nothing I was expecting in my lifetime, that's for sure.
Sure. Well, this is very interesting. We have about 20 minutes here left in our webinar show, and we thank you all for watching and staying engaged here with us. We are here with Roger Fuehring, the president of the RPCA, Railway Passenger Car Alliance, and Kirsten Ayers from the Leadville, Colorado and Southern Railroad in Leadville, Colorado. Mike, any questions here from the audience you want to share?
There was one from David Cauldron. David is from the Richmond Railroad Museum, and he asks, what are the exact pre-cleaning protocols once you were loading during the trips?
Sure, that's a very good question. I think a lot of us are prepared and already probably have procedures in place for cleaning trains in between runs, or I've mentioned before, our cleaning guys come in at 5:30 in the morning and wipe out the whole train, and that was the normal procedure. The question here though is during. Passengers and public are there. What do you have for answers there, Kirsten?
Like I said, I've added crew members so that they're constantly cleaning. We've got masks, we've got sanitization, we've got all of this stuff. But one of the interesting comments that came out last week was our health department sent out an email that said they didn't realize the supply chain was broken and nobody could get masks, gloves, or Clorox. So it's been quite interesting because the things that we need sometimes aren't easily available to us. Luckily, we have a amazing hoard and stock of some things. But during the train trip, what we thought was going to be a one person from the group would come into the concession car, purchase something, we could wipe it down and send them away, was not at all what happened. So we've, again, had to tweak along the way, figured out that we needed to make some more announcements, reminding people that only one person from a group can leave their spot at a time, reminding people to try and stay in their place. But also from the perspective of cleaning, we've got a lot of our cleaning people who are coming in early in the morning, and between trips. Luckily right now we're at one-a-days for the next 15 days. So it's all in the morning, and then in between while we're going on the way back down, people are wiping down things. And we've got some of our spray machines that are out there doing pressure watching and so forth. But it's nothing like what I was expecting. I was expecting people to kind of social distance on their own, which was completely not what happened. So all of the things that I'm telling my health department that's going to happen could potentially happen, but human beings don't necessarily act that way. So now I'm trying to stay out of asking my employees to require anything of patrons. I want them to still kind of be on their own to make their own decisions. But it's definitely been a lot more follow-up on our behalf from cleaning perspective, because one person walks up the ramp, the next person walks up the ramp. It's not like we thought, where we thought we would be able to sanitize in between human beings. We thought we'd be able to sanitize the top of everything. It was definitely not what we expected, because human beings are, strangely enough, being human beings, which
Sure.
maybe was not what I was thinking when I came back to this.
Sure. Well, that's an interesting thought, that sometimes people don't act quite as we expect them to.
Right.
I want to turn to Roger about as you're hearing this and picturing the people boarding and the public coming back to our trains, knowing what we all know now, the aspect of how we are covered and protected in terms of a little bit of legal, but more financial in terms of insurance. What kinds of things do you know about how the industry is looking at how coverage might go going forward?
Well, I think they're tiptoeing lightly right now. Obviously, different states have different definitions on what a pollutant is.
Sure.
So obviously, as far as if there's going to be claims filed against us for somebody contracting a virus, such as they did on the cruise ship industry, we're going to see new territory we haven't been into. And so currently, they're determining what's going to be rejected and what would be accepted as far as claims that are out there and where those guidelines are. And right now, they're somewhat non-committal as the insurance companies are discussing these situations. I compared it to 9/11. I was around in 9/11 in the railroad industry as a contractor. After it happened, insurance completely changed as far as terrorism insurance for just stepping on a freight railroad to work on freight cars. Which, why would you need terrorism insurance? But you had to have it. I see something similar to that most likely coming down the line, whether it's an additional rider or a whole separate policy. In the end, I think we as an organization have to show, much like Kristen is doing out there, that we are taking absolutely every step possible. Right now, if you were to go in downtown Branson, you would see their F unit with a mask over its nose. And I think that says to the community at whole that, hey, look, we are taking this serious. We're in this with you. I think the visual of seeing our employees going through the cars constantly sanitizing, that visual means a lot to the customers that board our trains. I know ever since I was 12 years old and worked as a car attendant, I always had to have a towel in my hand prior to boarding because it was a requirement to wipe the handrails down. And that has stuck with me to this day, even when I'm behind a diesel, no matter even if we went for a 15-minute drive before a passenger go up and down. The difference is now we're putting a disinfectant in that rack. I think keeping our doors open maybe when we can handle the air conditioning load to avoid them from using those doors. Any place where we can stop them touching, obviously, when they're going through the cars, they have to touch. One place that people forget to clean is the luggage racks. When you're going through, a lot of people will reach up and hold on the luggage racks as they're going through a car. And that's a place we never cleaned before.
Right.
I think having some type of sanitized sticker, or not necessarily a sticker, but a badge plate as you enter a car saying this car is being sanitized. And maybe you team up with a corporation that supplies the sanitation equipment for that. And that gives them good advertising, because there's a whole new industry out there for all those industries out there that clean up after fire and restoration. They're now getting involved in the cleaning of commercial buildings. So you might be able to find some of those organizations out there that are willing for the free advertisement. If you say, look, we're going to put 1,500 people through this train every day, and they're going to see your sign and that you clean the inside of this car, or your chemicals were used, that's a new way we can team up with these people, because that's a whole new industry. That's an industry that really did not exist prior to this. Now even companies like Cintas, uniform companies, are getting into this. So there's some opportunities out there to team up with other organizations out there that are separate from the railroad industry. And when you walk in there and you see that sign, when me and my wife went to that restaurant and we saw the antibacterial soap that we needed to use on our hands, and that the hostess, you couldn't just go in that restaurant, and that was not a restaurant you typically got seated at. Those are the type of things that stick to a customer's mind that says, you know what, they're taking the extra step. This is something that I shouldn't have to be too concerned with. So there's some new ideals out there, and I think there's going to be some more that emerge. As far as the liability side of it, I think it's something we're always going to face. And hopefully the insurance companies get this figured out for us, and we'll do everything we can on our behalf as those that are riding our trains to show that we are responsible and that we are taking this serious.
Sure. Well, it is an interesting thought there that, we are a luxury, similar to going out to a restaurant is a luxury. And you go there to have the experience of feeling a service has been thought of. They've thought of getting the food, and they thought of bringing the waitress out, and so on. Likewise, they thought of cleaning and how to make sure that you're safe while you're there, so it's the peace of mind that is involved, which is something that we can implement into our operations as well. We have about 10 minutes left here in our webinar series today with Roger from the RPCA and Kirsten from the Leadville and Southern, I'm gonna get this right, Leadville, Colorado and Southern Railroad, and of course Mike Huell from Dynamic Ticket Solutions, who's monitoring our online questions from our audience. Mike, what do we have?
Peter Lips from the Berkshire Scenic Railway asks, could you comment on what marketing channels and frequency you're using? Also, what is the museum's normal operating weekend?
That's a very good question. I did want to ask, actually, Kirsten, if you had already opened. A lot of us are facing the challenge of starting our operation rather than reopening our operation from a winter shutdown versus it was a lot easier if you already had the staff figured out, you already stocked the gift shop, but many of us have to do that for the first time still.
So actually I'm in the same boat because I have never done winter operations until this year. My season is usually Memorial Day weekend through the beginning of October. And this year we're excitingly going to have enough warm cars to be able to open in the winter. So I was in the same boat. And like you said, I wasn't even allowed in my retail establishment without having a protocol in place approved by our local health department. So what happened was I did phase 1 and phase 2 in this protocol. Phase 1 was to just get my employees and myself into that establishment so that we could start up, so that we could start purchasing, so that we could start renovating, so that we could start putting out retail. And then phase 2 went second step, and it had what I would do with patrons being allowed in. So I got phase 1 approved rather quickly since it was just personnel and I owned the property. But phase 2 was far more cumbersome, and I received little to no feedback because, again, nobody knew what it is that we did. But that's what I did to get this started, to get operating, is I split my operation in two, as it was, so that I could get my employees in, so that the health department could acknowledge that I could even start to work on my business. And then I had to go with phase 2, where I've got patrons here, what the limitation is. I'm probably looking at having to submit a phase 3 because as restrictions get eased up on June 1st, I'm going to have to do a phase 3 that I can then tweak for new adjustments, requesting more patrons to be allowed per car, and that kind of a thing.
Sure, sure. Well, we're coming to the end of our production here. As far as today's conversation goes, it's obviously an ongoing conversation that goes throughout. Roger, I want to see if I can get some of your closing thoughts on how the COVID-19 shutdown of railroad operations relates to the tourist railroad industry, as it also relates to private rail car owners.
Well, I think for a lot of us, there are behind the scenes people that we rely on for so much. The quality inspectors that we have out there for Amtrak certification is less than 10 right now. Most of those guys don't have a lot of work. We see people like the father and son team up there in northern Indiana that have the steam locomotives that travel, the Gremlins. They had every weekend booked except for 4, I think, this year for their steam locomotive projects on several tourist lines. Lack of income, I think they're going to be okay, but lack of income for all of us, including them, if we lose those resources, we won't get them back. And I think that's the tough one. So I think a lot of people are stepping out and having to be forerunners in this, such as Kristen and their group have done out there, which is admirable. And we're all going to have to get into that situation. Museums are very difficult. I know I grew up in Bellevue, Ohio. You touch everything there. It's a huge complex. We rely on volunteers. So now we're finding volunteers that are having to become specialists in disinfecting without damaging the plexiglass that's over our displays. That's something we've never thought of before. So there's a lot of pieces of history here that could be lost if it's not handled right. So we're going to learn this together. We appreciate forums like this. You guys are doing a great job. We appreciate it in this industry.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us here, Roger. Closing thoughts, Kirsten?
Just last commentary is going to be on advertising. Just know what I did. I moved all of my May advertising up to June, and I effectively, how do I put this, killed my patronage for this week. It was not worth doing, but I was doing it on the behest of my local health department. Yesterday, after having the worst days of ridership that I've seen in 12 years, I decided to buck the system and just start doing it. Like was mentioned, it's not easy, and we have to be fluid, but we also have to do the best we can for ourselves, which means maybe we're a restaurant, maybe we start advertising even though we were told not to, and just keep going, because there's a lot of us out here, and there's a lot of people who are backing you, and that's what I love about this forum, is because we get to know some of the hardships of everybody, and we can't all be nice right now, and that's okay.
Interesting. Well, I thank you very much. That is Kirsten from the Leadville, Colorado and Southern Railroad, and Roger Fuehring from the Railway Passenger Car Alliance. I'm Josh in Duluth, Minnesota, from the North Shore Scenic Railroad, North Shore of Lake Superior here in Duluth, Minnesota, and the Lake Superior Railroad Museum, which is right behind me. In the end, it's all about preservation and then making great experiences for our guests when they come, either currently or coming up very soon. Mike Huell, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the Dynamic Ticket Solutions wrap.
I want to thank Kristen and Roger for joining us again today, and especially Roger. This would be impossible without you, Josh. So thank you again for just an awesome job. We hope that you found this helpful and would like to encourage your feedback. Our next webinar will be next Thursday at the same time. Besides continuing the conversation today, we welcome panelist Jim Wren, editor of Trains Magazine. We'll be getting out an invitation before the end of the week, so please watch your email. Please feel free to share the invitation with people that you might think will benefit from the conversation. Let's all stay safe and stay connected. Thank you, everyone.